I think one of the reasons why so many businesses fail is because there's real loneliness of being an entrepreneur, of even being a solopreneur. It takes a lot out of you, and it's quite difficult. And in this video, I want to talk to you about maybe a different way of entrepreneurship, a different way of creating, a different way of making things, and showing up in the world as someone who is an entrepreneur. Because I think if we look at it differently, it can change a lot of things. So right now, what is the story of entrepreneurship, right? I think the story of entrepreneurship right now is in some ways imagined through the mythos or the narratives of just a few certain individuals, right? So for example, a very prominent story of entrepreneurship is The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand, which talks about this one brave, heroic character who's going out there and he chooses to make a stand against everyone. And he goes out there and he creates this thing that he wants to create. And this is the same type of story that we hear again and again and again in popular media, in pop culture, in magazines and publications and all sorts of things that glorifies this idea of an individual entrepreneur who goes on this quest, this mythic quest all by himself or herself and creates this big thing. This portfolio of huge businesses, this multi-billion-dollar unicorn, this whatever it is. So we have this storytelling, this mythos of the lone individual going out there and creating a business from scratch by themselves. And I think this is just a myth. It's just a narrative. And I think we are much poorer for it. I think that's one of the reasons why so many businesses fail. I think they say 8 out of 10 businesses fail within 1 or 2 years, something like that. I think it's this story, it's this narrative that makes so many businesses fail because we take on this assumption that we too have to walk down the same path. And I'd like to offer you a different narrative altogether. The University of Oxford runs a really interesting project. It's called the 80,000 Hours Project. And I'm going to put a link to that in the description below because I think you should definitely check it out. One of the things that 80,000 hours, which by the way is the number of hours that you will probably spend in your career working, in your lifetime working. But the 80,000 Hours Project talks about how do you make the most impact in your career. And one of the things that they found out is that a feeling of contribution, a feeling of belonging, a feeling of being part of an organization where you truly believe that you're contributing something special to it. How can you feel that you are contributing? How can you feel a sense of belonging? And I think the word belonging is such an interesting concept because there is a real loneliness epidemic with entrepreneurs, right? We don't really have a place where we feel like we belong. We are approaching things from, as I talked about in just a few minutes ago, we are approaching entrepreneurship from this mythos, this narrative of the lone individual going out there and creating something from scratch. And so what would it take if we started to think of entrepreneurship as a journey towards greater belonging? If we can find a place to feel like we belong, then we can create a lot of incredible things happen. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you think about back in the old days, quote unquote, the old days, whether it be here in America or really all across the globe, the point of being a business person, the point of being a trader, the point of someone who engaged in commerce was so that you could serve your community. You grew up in your neighborhood, you set up shop, you offered some service, some product within that community, and that's how you lived out your life. And we are forgetting that story. It was always about finding the people around you where you belong and then finding a way to serve them, finding a way to help them out. And it's only recently that we now think about, well, let me just build this new app, let me just build this thing, let me build this service, let me market globally, all that sort of stuff. But I'm willing to bet that you have a community that you belong to or that you want to belong to that you can start serving right away. So if you're an entrepreneur just getting started or you are trying to find a place to belong, that can be a great place to actually build a business. So what do I mean by that? I'll give you an example of how I got my first taste of entrepreneurship. A few years back, I had a problem and I tried to look everywhere for a solution to it until I came across this incredible subreddit community where people really were helping each other figure out, a way to get past this. So I started volunteering, I started writing, I started making posts on the subreddit in this community. And soon enough, I started getting DMs, I started getting direct messages, personal messages from people being like, hey, this is really cool. Can you help me a little bit more? So I started jumping on calls, helping people out with this problem. And calls led to coaching, And after a while, I was like, you know what? I'm actually pretty good at this. People are really feeling that they're being helped by it. And so I started charging for these coaching calls. And this was going really well. And after a while, I created a book. After a while, I created a course. I started creating all these different sorts of things. And then I created a group coaching at a much higher price point. And I started creating all these sorts of things because I found a community that I really wanted to belong to. And to this day, I've been able to help around 1,500 people with all sorts of things, and thousands more with things like books and whatnot. And the incredible thing about this is that I actually used a pseudo-anonymous name. People don't actually know who I am. I don't want them to know. I think there's a lot of freedom that comes from anonymity. And so that's another thing to think about, that, if you're approaching joining a community, sometimes anonymity gives you a level of freedom that you can really jump in and provide all your all. So think about that for a moment, right? So I was able to find a community, I was able to find a way to serve them, and I was able to make belonging the number one thing. And from a sense of belonging, I was able to create. I was able to look into myself. I was able to help other people, and people started noticing how I could help them. Now I have seen this trend play out multiple times. When to this day I work with attorneys, I work with lawyers, I work with accountants, those sorts of things. And the business that I've been able to build on that is based on belonging. I have a lot of friends who are attorneys. I have a lot of friends who are accountants, and they come to me and they have certain questions. They have the same sets of challenges, and I really like some of these people. And so I have a high bar. I need to like the people that I'm working with. I want to feel a sense of belonging. I would like to hang out with them, even if I'm not working. I want them to be my friends, which I know is in some ways a very taboo thing, but I make belonging into a very important part of growing my business, because I think if we do that, we're going to be happier for it. So I know a lot of entrepreneurs talk about growth. Let's grow at all costs. But I think belonging is the actual secret sauce towards growth. Right? The happier you are, the more grateful you are to show up because you belong to this community, the more you're likely to want to show up and create new things to continue to contribute to that group. We don't talk about belonging as much, but this really is the secret sauce. And you might not become a unicorn. And I think in some ways that's a very good thing. We don't need more unicorns. I think we need a lot more entrepreneurs like you and me, small scale entrepreneurs, tiny entrepreneurs who are out there creating products and services that actually serves their community. Right? So this is one of those reasons. I talked about this in my previous video, which I'll link to, somewhere up here. But I talk about this in a previous video where you might think that you don't have a product or a service that's the world's best, right? Because you think that you need to create something that's great for the entire planet. But in some ways, if you find a community and you find someone to help, that's enough, right? They're not looking for the world's best. They're looking for who belongs within the community that I belong to and who can help me in that space. And so one of the things that I do with a lot of attorneys is that I help them not create a very fancy looking website or really puff up their chest and talk about the incredible credentials they have, the law school they went to, but I really just help them talk about, well, where do you belong? I'm like, well, just help them, right? Because it's not about systems. It's not about any of this stuff. It's not about building out big lean canvases and whatnot. I bet there's a gold mine in every community that you belong to or that you want to belong to, right? And so that's the other kind of prompt here, is that, is there a community you'd like to belong to? And if so, go there and see how you can start contributing. Forget about starting a business. Just start figuring out what you can contribute. Make the free posts, volunteer, help people out. And from that, people will notice your unique factors, the things that are unique about you, the things that you're really good at that no one else in that community is good at. And then a business will emerge out of that almost organically, like it did for me. Business becomes not a source of something that may or may not work. It actually became a sure bet when I launched that course, when I launched that book, when I launched that coaching, right? Customers just came to me because I had invested in that community, because I wanted to belong to that community. And so this whole idea of business is going to be this thing that you might fail at goes away, that fear goes away. And that's quite incredible. Talking about growth, it's actually remarkable how easy growth becomes when you stop focusing on growth, but you start focusing on belonging and happiness. All of these 1,500 customers that I've told you about, I haven't spent a cent in advertising any of my products or services, right? The community keeps growing because people have this problem. People want to come to this, sense of belonging online. and they want to be anonymous. And through that whole system, I keep getting customers coming my way because I keep thinking about how do I give back to this community. And the incredible thing with communities is that people talk to one another. They talk and they refer one another to helping one another. That's what makes communities work. And so this idea of growth goes away, because if you focus on serving your community, you will grow organically. I know an extremely successful photographer who does this just part-time. And he only does this on weekends and on weeknights, that type of thing. And he's built a 6-figure photography business just helping one community. I know doctors, I know dentists, I know so many different people that I know personally, that I've worked with, coached personally, who have built incredible 6-figure, very comfortable businesses from just helping people that they know. And so we need to start changing the narrative of that lone individual who's out there hunting in the wilderness and builds this next big thing that changes the world. And let's change the narrative and make it about, where do I belong? Where do I want to continue belonging? How can I help the people in the space that I belong? That makes the bar so much easier. It makes growth so much easier because people are referring, talking, trusting one another, and sending business your way. That's what's so incredible about pursuing entrepreneurship from a community first, belonging first perspective. The last thing I want to talk about is this idea of entrepreneurship as a way of almost proving yourself, right? I think I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs who are in it to prove themselves. They're making 7 figures, some of them, and they are many of them are profoundly unhappy. They're working 14, 16-hour days. Their marriages are in shambles. Their relationship with their kids are in shambles. They're constantly on the treadmill because they're approaching entrepreneurship as a way to fill the void in their heart, the void that they have that you can solve if you just had belonging, if you could just belong to a group of people where you truly felt home. And people don't like that approach of thinking about it because they think, well, they're losing themselves, that if they started to belong, if they started to actually be happy, they would lose the fire, which is so ridiculous. I think, if anything, the fire becomes something that doesn't consume you, but something that ends up nourishing you if you find a community, right? And so it's almost like a fire. It becomes a campfire that's nourishing a group of people, and we're all sitting by the beach. We're enjoying a hot chocolate and marshmallows and that sort of thing, versus a fire that's a bonfire and it's just lighting up the whole sky. It's a wildfire that's lighting up the whole forest and consuming you in the process. And I think it's so destructive to see entrepreneurs going out there, building these businesses as a way to fill the void, to prove themselves, to be worthy of their own selves. And I'm here to tell you that you are already worthy. You already matter. You already matter to so many people. And you just think that they're beneath you, or that belonging to that group doesn't actually matter. But if you just put your ego aside, if you just put that down, that weight down, it becomes so much easier to create something incredible for them, be happy and fulfilled in the process, and not hurt other people. Because I know that all of these sorts of terms are in vogue right now, right? Like belonging and vulnerability and authenticity, be authentic, like all that stuff is so in vogue right now. And I've seen so many entrepreneurs actually use that as permission to be complete jerks to other people. So they understand all these ideas intellectually. They will even put out messages out there to people so that they can recruit talent, recruit customers, all that kind of stuff by saying things like belonging and community and vulnerability and all that sort of thing. But they don't actually walk the talk. They have a real deep void in them. And so they're using these tools almost like weapons, right? They're no longer tools. They're using them as weapons to get people in, but they're profoundly unhappy people. And I think we need to go past this idea of intellectual understanding of these concepts to fully embracing them. And one of the reasons why I'm creating these YouTube videos is that I can continue expanding my circle of community. I want people to belong somewhere. And I want to help you. I want to belong with you. I want to help you build the dream that you have. And I think if we all did that, if we made belonging into the primary driver of everything we did, we would create a better world, right? Like that is my ulterior motive for everything that I'm doing. I want to create a better world for my kid, a world where there's a lot more empathy. That's my ulterior motive. I think if we're all free to be entrepreneurs in some form or another, if we all feel a sense of belonging, we all feel a sense of empathy, we can create a better world because we're going to be helping people. If we're going to be approaching things from a sense of altruism, we're going to be approaching things from a sense of wanting to give. And this is the difference. This is how we get past. This is how we make this transition from this part of our story, this part of our story that says that businesses are ruining the world, towards this new place in the future where businesses, entrepreneurship, creativity, self-expression are actually the most fundamental aspect of how we live our lives. So if I can help you on this journey, if I can contribute to you in any way, please leave a comment below. If you want to talk to me about some of the challenges you're having with entrepreneurship, getting started, or sustaining a business, leave a comment below, reach out to me. There's a contact form that I'll put in the description below. But I'd love to hear from you. And until next time, thank you. Namaste.